In 2011, the Philadelphia Eagles were coming off of a 10-6 season with the resurrected Michael Vick at quarterback. They won the NFC East in 2010, but lost in the first round of the playoffs to the eventual Super Bowl champions. The Eagles' front office had enough of early playoff exits and decided to go all in 2011. They assembled one of the best rosters in NFL history, one supposed to result in a Super Bowl. But after a year or two, they never even made the playoffs. This is the complete history of the Dream Team era in Philly and one of the most disappointing super teams of all time. One reason why the Eagles' failure in 2011 was so surprising is because of who was leading the team. Philadelphia's head coach then, Andy Reid, is now considered one of the greatest of all time for the Kansas City Chiefs. At the time, though, he was known for never quite being able to get over the hump in Philly, enduring 9 playoff losses during his tenure, which included 4 conference championships and a Super Bowl in 2004. Even though the Eagles were perennial contenders all throughout the 2000s, they still never managed to get a ring. However, the 2011 roster was unlike any Andy Reid and young general manager Howie Roseman had previously assembled. Michael Vick was coming off a career year as the Eagles' starting quarterback, earning the AP Comeback Player of the Year award and finishing second in Offensive Player of the Year voting. While Vick didn't possess the same rushing ability as he did in his younger years with the Falcons, he dramatically grew as a pure passer in 2010 with 3,000 yards in the air, still chipped in an additional 600 on the ground, totaling 30 touchdowns on the campaign. The other piece to Philly's masterful running game was LaShawn McCoy, the soon-to-be third-year running back who took a major step in 2010, tallying over 1,650 scrimmage yards. His running style was defined by his patience and elusiveness, garnering him the nickname Shady. Another addition to the backfield was Ronnie Brown, the former Miami Dolphin who ran the Wildcat formation very effectively just a few seasons prior. Was no joke. Ronnie Brown was also the second overall pick of the 2005 NFL Draft out of Auburn. A backfield with Ronnie and Shady would be a problem for the league. But it wasn't set to be all ground and pound in Philadelphia, with 2-star young wideouts in Deshaun Jackson and Jeremy Maclin on the outside. Jackson and Maclin combined for over 2,000 yards in 2010, both possessing the unmatched speed to torch opposing DBs all over the field in Andy Reid's explosive offense. Howie Roseman also signed Steve Smith, a receiver who recently came off of a 1,200-yard season for the NFC East rival New York Giants. Brent Selleck was the team's starting tight end, and he was solid. Selleck almost gave glimpses of what Andy Reid envisioned of the position when Reid eventually got his hands on Travis Kelce with the Chiefs. But this is 2011, and Travis wasn't in the league yet. But guess what? His older brother, Jason Kelce, got drafted in 2011 by the Eagles in the 6th round. And right away, Jason Kelce anchored the trenches as the starting center and became the first rookie in Eagles history to start all 16 games for the position. It was the beginning of a Hall of Fame career for the eldest Kelce, and he wasn't the only household name on the offensive line. Jason Peters was in the prime of his career for the Eagles as a left tackle. Coach Reid claimed he was the best tackle in football, and there is no doubt he'll be in the Hall of Fame when his time comes. Joining him on the left side from free agency was Evan Mathis, a very good offensive guard. These big guys paved the way for all the hype that was building. And if you think the offense was loaded, wait until you hear about the defense. Asante Samuel returned as the lockdown corner following 4 straight Pro Bowl seasons, which also included 2 All-Pro selections. Howie Roseman then brought in Nnamdi Asomugha in a blockbuster signing who, following 3 consecutive All-Pro seasons with the Oakland Raiders, was essentially locking in the no-fly zone era in Philly. This secondary was primed to be one of, if not the best in the NFL. And with the additions of Jason Babin at D-end, Evan Mathis to beef up the O-line, Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie as a plug-and-play DB, and Vince Young as the backup quarterback, it's no wonder this roster was considered a super team. When reporters asked Vince Young what he thought about the Eagles roster before the season started, he shared a bold statement.
Oh, dream team.
And no one would argue with that take, as the Eagles on paper appeared to be just that, a dream team. The season started out exactly as the Eagles had hoped, with a 31-13 blowout of the St. Louis Rams. Michael Vick looked iconic, racking up nearly 300 yards of offense and 2 touchdowns with no turnovers. But the Eagles didn't realize that the Rams would be the worst team in football that year. The Eagles' perfect start ended in Week 2 when Philadelphia gave up a 10-point fourth-quarter comeback against the Atlanta Falcons after leading 31-21. The very next week, the secondary that they once believed was impenetrable put Victor Cruz on the map for his incredible sophomore season, giving up 110 yards and 2 touchdowns to the wideout, who led the Giants to an easy 29-16 victory. Instead of rebounding, the losses quickly stacked up, with the so-called Dream Team losing 4 straight games against teams that they were much better than on paper. After Michael Vick sustained an injury late in Week 9, the 3-6 Eagles now had to send Vince Young out to start. The former Texas Longhorn and 3rd overall pick in the 2006 NFL Draft was going to get a shot to finally prove he could thrive in a dreamy offense loaded with talent under one of the best play callers compared to his time with the Tennessee Titans. Vince Young, unfortunately, couldn't do any better, and despite winning the division rematch against the eventual Super Bowl champion Giants, Young proceeded to brutally lose the next 2 games against the Patriots and Seahawks. It seemed as though the trivial moniker Dream Team now held a life of its own, negatively weighing over the players and staff as the season fell apart before their eyes. Now sitting at 4-8, the Eagles needed a miracle run to even break 500, let alone reach the aspirations they set for themselves before the year began. With their backs against the wall, Michael Vick resuscitated the team, throwing for over 1,100 yards and a 7-3 touchdown-to-interception ratio to lead the Eagles to wins over the Dolphins, Jets, Cowboys, and Redskins to close out the season. Unfortunately, 8-8 was not a good enough record to earn a wild card spot in the NFC in 2011, and so the Eagles found themselves on the outside looking in on the NFL playoffs. But all of that begs the question, what actually happened? The Eagles had an incredible roster of players with over 25 Pro Bowl seasons on the team's depth chart, so where did it all go wrong? Simply put, almost none of their acquisitions produced at the level Coach Reid and Howie Roseman projected. Nnamdi Asomugha was the most coveted player in the 2011 free agency period and was viewed as a player that would put defensive coordinator Juan Castillo's unit over the top. Asomugha was locked down with Oakland, and quarterbacks wouldn't dare throw his way. In reality, Asomugha just wasn't a good fit. He was primarily used as a man coverage corner for the duration of his success with the Raiders and didn't mesh well with Philly's zone-based scheme. Instead of being a leader in the locker room, Asomugha was accused of rarely talking to his teammates and was often spotted by the media eating lunch alone in the parking lot outside of the Eagles' training facilities. And Asomugha wasn't alone in his ways. Many players and front office members noted that the Eagles weren't very team-like. Rather, they were more of a collection of players that on their own were very successful but just didn't work very well together. While the defense finished as a top 10 unit strictly in terms of points per game, that isn't indicative of how they played for most of the season. Before their 4-game rally to end the season, Philly allowed 23.5 points per game while playing against one of the worst divisions in football, although the Giants did end up winning the Super Bowl with a 9-7 regular season record. It's interesting because the Eagles still finished the season with 2 of the top units in the NFL in total production, but the real issue that kept them from realizing their potential was turnovers. Their Week 8 drubbing of the Cowboys at home was their only game of the entire season without a turnover, and they averaged 2.4 turnovers lost per game, which is entirely unsustainable. Their ball security woes peaked in the Week 5 loss to Buffalo, where Michael Vick threw 4 interceptions and receiver Jason Avant coughed it up in additional time to make 5 giveaways on the outing. That said, the fact that they only lost by a single score, 31-24, is remarkable. The Eagles could move the ball up and down the field as advertised, but they couldn't protect the football. An additional extraneous circumstance that may have contributed to the Eagles' collapse is the 2011 lockout. Heading into the 2011 season, the NFLPA was set to renew its collective bargaining agreement with the 32 NFL owners. Because of this 4-month-long holdout, free agency, training camp, and other team meetings were all delayed. Eventually, an agreement was made in late July, but to the Eagles, the damage had already been done. You see, Andy Reid and Howie Roseman had been preparing Philadelphia for significant spending in 2011 for several years. After coming just short of their Super Bowl goals so often, Reid and Roseman had organized their finances to acquire the talent they needed to put a seal on the roster and make the Eagles surefire Super Bowl contenders. The only problem is, it takes significant time for players to adjust to a new environment and coaching staff and vice versa. So when the Eagles made all these signings and trades, all of these players had minimal time to get acclimated with the team before week 1 of the NFL season. The team chemistry never developed. This major oversight is likely one of the main reasons why the Eagles struggled to win so mightily in 2011. While football is a highly complex sport, sometimes the answer is as simple as this reason given by free agent acquisition Cullen Jenkins, who stated, "We didn't gel." Bringing in so many players who had success on their own on different teams can create that problem, with either too many or not enough leaders in the locker room. And on top of that, Roseman commented after the season how bringing in so much outside talent can send a bad message to players who were drafted by the team and have been with them for a long time. Statistically speaking, it wasn't all bad in Philly. The team leaders in numbers for the Eagles that year, of course, was Michael Vick, passing for 3,303 yards, 18 touchdowns, 14 interceptions through the air. On the ground, Mike ran 76 times for 589 yards and 1 TD. The interceptions were no good, but Mike did his best to lead the Eagles in the 13 games he suited up for. More impressively, the guy Michael Vick handed the ball off to went off in 2011. LaShawn McCoy had himself an incredible year, running the rock 273 times for 1,309 yards and 17 touchdowns. He also caught 48 passes for 315 yards and 3 TDs. Shady was elusive and dangerous for Philly and among the Eagles' top producers. The receivers put up some solid numbers. Deshaun Jackson hauled in 58 balls for 961 yards and 4 scores. Jeremy Maclin and Brent Selleck each had over 800 yards and 5 touchdowns. Jason Babin had been a longtime NFL backup for an assortment of teams after entering the league in 2004, but really came into his own in 2010 for the Titans, earning a Pro Bowl nod after a 12-sack season. While the rest of the Eagles struggled to adjust to the new-look defense, Babin excelled, compiling 18 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, and a pass breakup in what would end up being by far the best campaign of his career for the Eagles. In the end, he earned a second-team All-Pro selection for his efforts, and although he would be shipped away to Jacksonville the very next season, he was the only addition worth even a semblance of the contract he was given by the Eagles that year. We can't forget about the homegrown guy opposite of Jason Babin, Trent Cole. Cole had himself a really good season as well, totaling 11 sacks. Cole and Babin were a menacing tandem that the Dream Team unfortunately overshadowed. The fallout of the 2011 Eagles changed a lot about the franchise. Although Andy Reid wasn't yet fired, the writing was on the wall. He was dismissed after a 4-12 record the following year. Michael Vick shared the same fate, with his stats falling off a cliff in 2012, and ultimately he was released by the team. After such a dominant decade under Reid from 2000 to 2010, the magic had finally worn off and the Eagles regressed into a bottom feeder for several seasons. And while it didn't necessarily shake up the league, the man who started the Dream Team curse ultimately fell victim to it in the end, as Vince Young retired following the 2011 season after a 6-year NFL career. Of course, this eventually ushered in the Doug Peterson era, which allowed the franchise to win its first ever Super Bowl in 2017 after an unlikely finish with Nick Foles at the helm. So all ended well with Eagles fans. But imagine what could have gone differently had the team succeeded. Even if those 2011 Eagles didn't win the Super Bowl, but just had a strong regular season record and won a playoff game, Reid may have never been fired, and of course that firing allowed him to take his current position as the Kansas City Chiefs head coach. And with Reid on a different team, there's no telling who would have selected Patrick Mahomes in the 2017 NFL Draft. That's all semantics, but the real moral of the story is that you can't buy a Super Bowl on borrowed money. The 2021 Rams, who probably did the closest thing to that by bringing in Matthew Stafford and Von Miller, had their own core with Aaron Donald leading the charge on defense and Cooper Kupp on offense. And even that is an outlier. History tells you that homegrown talent wins championships. So here's a warning to all future self-proclaimed dream teams. If it seems too good to be true, it probably is. Unless you're Tom Brady and the Bucks, but that's for another video. All in all, why do you think the 2011 Eagles Dream Team didn't work out? Were there any details that we missed? Let me know in the comments. Your feedback helps us improve the channel and the quality of our content.